The morning Samantha Brooks walked into the divorce attorney's office with 6-month-old Lily nestled against her chest, she hadn't expected to find her husband, James Hawthorne, sitting there with his executive assistant, Chloe Davis. The diamond on Chloe's left hand caught the light, momentarily blinding Samantha as surely as the betrayal had. "Sam!" James stood, his tailored suit unwrinkled despite the tension filling the room. His voice carried that familiar authoritative tone that had once made her feel protected but now felt like a wall between them. "You're early." Samantha adjusted Lily in her arms, the baby's warm weight grounding her as the world threatened to spin out of control. "Apparently not early enough. Have you ever had that moment when betrayal blinds you more painfully than light reflecting off a diamond that should have been your daughter's inheritance? When the future you thought was certain shatters in an instant?" This is the story of a woman who walked into her divorce attorney's office with her baby daughter, only to find her husband already there with his pregnant assistant, wearing her family's heirloom ring. But it's also the story of how that devastating moment became the catalyst for reclaiming the woman she'd forgotten she could be. What would you do if the man who promised to cherish you forever was planning a new life while you were creating one? Stay with us to discover how one woman's journey through heartbreak led to a triumph that changed not just her life, but her daughter's future forever. My beautiful queens, listen closely. There comes a moment in many of our lives when we stand at the crossroads of who we've become and who we were meant to be. Sometimes it takes having everything stripped away, the marriage we thought was forever, the partner we believed in, even the identity we carefully constructed, to remember the woman who existed before all of that. That fierce, capable woman who knew her worth. She's still there inside you, waiting. When life hands you betrayal instead of the future you planned, remember that you're not just losing something. You're being given the chance to reclaim yourself. The most beautiful transformations often begin in our darkest moments. This is your permission to rise. Chloe's hand slipped into James's, her engagement ring a silent declaration. The ring Samantha recognized, her grandmother's antique diamond that James had promised would one day belong to Lily. "Mrs. Hawthorne," the receptionist called, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding in her waiting room. "Ms. Winters will see you now." Samantha straightened her spine, summoning dignity from some hidden reserve. "That's Ms. Brooks now," she corrected, reclaiming the name she'd surrendered at the altar 7 years ago. "Or it will be very soon." As she walked past them, Lily's tiny hand reached out, grasping at the air between her and the father who had already begun erasing them both from his life. James's eyes followed that small gesture, something unreadable flickering across his face before his corporate mask slid back into place. The door closed behind Samantha with a soft click that somehow sounded like the final note of a symphony she'd once believed would play forever. Diana Winters, one of Atlanta's most formidable divorce attorneys, stood as Samantha entered, her keen eyes taking in the baby, the tension in Samantha's shoulders, and the determination in her stride. "I see you've had the pleasure of meeting the happy couple," Diana said, her tone dry as she gestured for Samantha to take a seat. An unexpected surprise. Samantha settled Lily on her lap, the baby's weight anchoring her to the present when memories threatened to pull her under. "I wasn't aware they'd be here today." "Neither was I." Diana's mouth tightened with displeasure. "Bradford Mills requested a meeting with me this morning. I assumed it would be the attorneys only. Bringing his client and his client's companion was a power play. James excels at those." Samantha stroked Lily's soft hair as the baby began to fuss. "He's built an empire on knowing exactly when to show strength. Well, two can play that game." Diana sat across from her, sliding a folder across the polished desk. "He's offering a settlement." Samantha scanned the figures, bouncing Lily gently as she read. Full ownership of their vacation home in Savannah. A lump sum that would provide comfortable living for years. Monthly child support well above standard guidelines. "What's the catch?" she asked, having learned that James's generosity always came with conditions. Primary physical custody would go to James, with you having visitation every other weekend and one evening per week. Diana's expression remained professional, but her eyes reflected understanding of what this meant. He's arguing that his financial resources can provide Lily with advantages you cannot match as a single mother rebuilding a career. The room seemed to tilt momentarily as Samantha processed this. He barely knows her. He's missed most of her life already. He's hired a full-time nanny with impeccable credentials. His mother has agreed to relocate to Atlanta to help with childcare. On paper, he can provide stability and resources that make him appear the more suitable primary parent. And the courts would favor that over a mother's bond with her infant daughter? Diana sighed, removing her glasses. Family court should consider the totality of circumstances, including the primary caregiver relationship. But I won't sugarcoat this wealth and influence matter, especially with certain judges. James has already retained Bradford Mills, who has a remarkable record of securing favorable custody arrangements for high-net-worth fathers. Samantha looked down at Lily, now sleeping peacefully against her chest, unaware that her future was being negotiated in sterile legal terms. The thought of seeing her daughter only 8 days a month was physically painful, a hollowness expanding beneath her ribs. "I won't accept this," she said finally. "I can't. Fighting will be expensive," Diana warned. "And James has significantly more resources to sustain a prolonged legal battle. Then I'll need to be smarter than him." Samantha straightened, a familiar determination rising within her. The same resolve that had once helped her build a photography business from nothing. "What do we need to do?" Diana smiled for the first time, a sharp expression that suggested she'd been waiting for this response. "First, we document everything. Every moment you've been Lily's primary caregiver. Every pediatrician appointment he's missed. Every middle-of-the-night feeding you've handled alone." "I have all of that," Samantha said. "I've kept a journal since she was born." "Good. Next, we need to stabilize your financial situation. Courts look for stability. Are you working currently?" "I've started rebuilding my photography business. I have 3 corporate clients and a wedding booked next month." "Excellent. We'll need to demonstrate that you can provide for Lily independently." Diana made notes as she spoke. "And your living situation?" "A 2-bedroom apartment near Piedmont Park. It's small but in a good school district." "Perfect. Now, about James's relationship with his new fiancée." Diana's tone sharpened. "When did that begin, exactly?" 6 months before Lily was born. While I was pregnant." The words still tasted bitter. "Yes, and she was at our home multiple times during my pregnancy, sitting across from me at dinner parties while they were—" Samantha trailed off, mindful of Lily's presence even in sleep. "This changes our approach considerably." Diana set down her pen. "Judges tend to take a dim view of infidelity, particularly when it begins during a pregnancy. It speaks to character and judgment, both relevant factors in custody determinations." For the first time since walking into the attorney's office, Samantha felt a flicker of hope. "So we have a chance?" "More than a chance." Diana's expression was resolute. "But this will get ugly before it gets better. James won't relinquish control easily, and men in his position are accustomed to winning." "I'm not afraid of ugly," Samantha replied, thinking of the beautiful photographs she'd taken in her career, many capturing profound emotion amid difficult circumstances. Sometimes the most important truths aren't pretty. 12 years earlier, Samantha had been behind her camera at the Atlanta Children's Hospital Charity Gala, focusing her lens on the city's elite as they performed philanthropy with varying degrees of sincerity. Most faces showed the same practiced smiles, the same careful positioning to ensure their good deeds were properly documented. Then James Hawthorne had entered the frame. "Could you not do that?" he'd asked, noticing her camera trained on him as he knelt to speak with a young patient in a wheelchair, away from the main crowd. "Do what?" Samantha had lowered her camera slightly, intrigued by his request when most attendees practically posed for her. "Take photos when I'm actually talking to the kids. It makes this feel like a performance." He'd stood, extending his hand. "James Hawthorne, I know who you are." Everyone in Atlanta knew the founder of Hawthorne Innovations, whose cardiac devices had revolutionized treatment options. "Samantha Brooks, and I wasn't photographing you for the publicity shots." That moment was Different. Different how? His eyes had narrowed, suspicious. Genuine. She'd shrugged, unapologetic. Most people here are performing charity. You were just being kind when you thought no one was watching. Something in his expression had shifted, surprise replacing irritation. May I see? She turned her camera, showing him the display. The image captured him mid-conversation with the child, his expression attentive and respectful. No trace of condescension or the self-awareness that often accompanied charitable interactions. You made me look human, he'd said, genuine surprise in his voice. Most photographers just capture the suit. I photograph people, not positions, Samantha had replied, unintimidated by his reputation or wealth. There's always a person behind the power. He'd studied her then, really looked at her in a way that made her feel both seen and slightly unnerved. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? I don't date subjects, she'd replied automatically. Then don't bring your camera. His smile had transformed his face, softening the sharp lines of success and ambition. Just bring yourself. Against her better judgment, she'd said yes. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of private jets to weekend getaways, intimate dinners and restaurants closed to accommodate them, and long conversations that stretched until dawn. James had shown her a world of privilege she'd only glimpsed through her camera lens, while she'd shown him how to see beauty in ordinary moments. Look, she'd said one evening, pointing to an elderly couple on a park bench, holding hands as they fed pigeons. That's what real wealth looks like. James had watched them, his expression thoughtful. 50 years together and still choosing each other every day. Exactly. She'd squeezed his hand. All your billions can't buy that. No, he'd agreed, turning to face her. But they can help me build a life where I have time for moments like that. Where we have time. 6 months after they'd met, he'd taken her to the rooftop of his penthouse overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Dinner had been served by a private chef. Champagne poured as the sun set, and the city lights began to mirror the emerging stars. You've changed me, he told her as he dropped to one knee, opening a velvet box to reveal a vintage diamond ring. I've spent my life building things, acquiring things. You've taught me to actually see what matters. The ring had belonged to his grandmother. He'd explained, a woman who'd maintained her artistic spirit despite marrying into a family that valued practicality above all else. She would have loved you, he'd said. She always told me to find someone who would help me see beyond the balance sheet. Samantha had believed him then, had believed in the future they planned together, a partnership of equals despite their different backgrounds and resources. She'd believed him when he said her photography career mattered, when he promised her work wouldn't be sacrificed to his. We'll build something beautiful together, he'd promised as he slid the ring onto her finger. Something that matters more than any company or fortune. Now, as Samantha left Diana's office, carefully navigating the heavy door while balancing Lily and her diaper bag, she caught sight of James and Chloe entering the parking garage. They moved in perfect sync, two ambitious people with aligned goals and compatible visions. Once, she had moved through the world with that same confidence at James's side. But watching them now, Samantha realized something that sent an unexpected wave of clarity through her confusion and pain. What she was mourning wasn't just the end of her marriage or the family she'd imagined for Lily. She was mourning the woman she'd allowed herself to become, someone who had gradually surrendered her own vision to support someone else's. We're going to be okay, she whispered to Lily, who stirred slightly at the sound of her mother's voice. Better than okay. We're going to remember who we really are. The first strategic move in what Diana called the custody chess match came 3 weeks later. James filed an emergency motion requesting temporary primary custody of Lily, claiming Samantha's work schedule created an unstable environment for their daughter. He's citing your evening photography sessions and weekend weddings as evidence that your career choices are incompatible with being a primary caregiver, Diana explained during their emergency meeting. He's offering a more consistent presence through his mother and the nanny. That's absurd, Samantha protested. I schedule everything around Lily's needs. I bring her with me to daytime client meetings. I only book evening sessions when my neighbor Grace can watch her, and Grace has been like a grandmother to her. Is Grace a licensed childcare provider? No. She's a retired elementary school teacher who lives across the hall. She adores Lily. Diana made a note. We'll need to address the childcare arrangement. James is arguing that an unlicensed provider doesn't meet the standard of care he can provide. With a nanny he's met twice and his mother who lives in another state, Samantha couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. He's barely spent 3 consecutive hours alone with Lily since she was born. Which is why we're filing our countermotion today. Diana slid a document across the desk. We're requesting that the court appoint a guardian ad litem, an independent attorney who will represent Lily's interests and investigate both home environments. Will that help us? A good guardian ad litem will see through surface advantages to the underlying relationships. They'll observe interactions, interview caregivers, review records. They'll notice if James is performing parenthood rather than living it. The hearing for both motions was scheduled for the following week. Barely enough time for Samantha to prepare. She spent those days documenting every aspect of Lily's routine, gathering statements from her pediatrician, creating a portfolio that captured the life she'd built for her daughter despite limited resources. The morning of the hearing, Samantha dressed with deliberate care. A modest navy dress that projected both professionalism and maternal warmth, minimal jewelry, subtle makeup that couldn't be criticized as either too glamorous or too neglectful. Every choice calculated to counter the narrative James was constructing. In the courthouse hallway, she spotted him immediately, commanding attention in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Chloe at his side in cream silk that probably cost more than Samantha's monthly rent. The contrast was exactly what James had intended: success and stability versus struggle and uncertainty. Samantha, he approached with the confidence of someone unaccustomed to losing. You're looking well. Thank you. She kept her response neutral, aware that every interaction could potentially be reported to the judge. James glanced at the baby carrier where Lily slept peacefully. How is she? She's thriving. She rolled over completely yesterday for the first time. Something flickered across his face. Regret, perhaps, or simple recognition of another milestone missed. I'm glad to hear it. Diana appeared at Samantha's side, a steadying presence. We should go in. Judge Harlow is known for starting precisely on time. As they entered the courtroom, Samantha felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about custody arrangements or visitation schedules. This was about fighting for her daughter's right to be raised by someone who saw her as a person, not a possession or a pawn. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself after someone tried to break you, hit that like button and share this with a sister who needs to hear this message. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Eleanor Harlow entered, her reputation for no-nonsense efficiency preceding her. At 62, she'd presided over family court for nearly 2 decades, her silver hair and penetrating gaze lending her an air of authority that commanded respect. We're here regarding the matter of Hawthorne versus Brooks, she stated, reviewing the documents before her. Emergency motion for temporary custody filed by Mr. Hawthorne. Counter motion for appointment of a guardian ad litem filed by Ms. Brooks. She looked up, surveying both parties. Mr. Mills, you may present your client's position first. Bradford Mills rose, the picture of polished confidence in his bespoke suit. Your Honor, my client, James Hawthorne, is seeking temporary primary custody of his daughter, Lily, due to concerns about the unstable environment created by Ms. Brooks's unpredictable work schedule. As CEO of Hawthorne Innovations, Mr. Hawthorne can provide consistent care through qualified professionals, ensuring Lily's needs are met with the highest standard of attention. Samantha watched as Mills presented a carefully crafted narrative, her photography career portrayed as erratic and self-indulgent, her modest apartment described as inadequate compared to the family home, her childcare arrangement with Grace characterized as casual and unprofessional. Each word was technically accurate but twisted to create an impression of instability and insufficiency. Furthermore, Mills continued, Mr. Hawthorne's mother, Eleanor Hawthorne, has relocated to Atlanta specifically to assist with Lily's care, providing the kind of family support that Ms. Brooks, as an only child with deceased parents, simply cannot offer. The casual mention of her parents' deaths A car accident 5 years earlier that still haunted Samantha's dreams felt like a deliberate wound. She gripped the edge of the table, forcing herself to remain composed as Mills continued his methodical dismantling of her fitness as a mother. When Diana's turn came, she approached the podium with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, what we've just heard is a masterclass in how wealth can be weaponized in custody disputes. The reality is that Samantha Brooks has been Lily's primary caregiver since birth, while Mr. Hawthorne has been, at best, a visitor in his daughter's life." Diana presented the documentation Samantha had prepared, pediatrician records showing James's absence from appointments, the detailed journal of Lily's care, statements from clients who had observed Samantha's careful balancing of motherhood and career rebuilding. As for the child care arrangement with Ms. Grace Wilson, she is a retired elementary school teacher with 40 years of experience in child development. She has completed CPR certification and child care safety courses specifically to care for Lily during Ms. Brooks's occasional evening work commitments. Judge Harlow interrupted. "How often are these evening commitments, Ms. Abernathy?" "Currently twice weekly, Your Honor." Ms. Brooks has deliberately limited her schedule to ensure consistency for Lily. The judge made a note, then turned her attention to the countermotion. "Regarding your request for a guardian ad litem, what specific benefit do you believe this would provide?" "Your Honor, a guardian ad litem would be able to observe both households and parenting styles firsthand, beyond the polished presentations we see in court. They would witness the actual relationships, the daily interactions that truly determine a child's well-being." Diana's voice remained measured but passionate. "They would see beyond financial resources to the emotional resources being provided to Lily." Judge Harlow considered this, then addressed both attorneys. "I'm inclined to grant the motion for a guardian ad litem. These situations are rarely as clear-cut as either side presents." She turned to Mills. "As for the emergency motion for temporary custody, I see no evidence of actual emergency here. The current arrangement will continue until the guardian ad litem completes their investigation." Relief washed over Samantha, though she kept her expression neutral. This wasn't a victory, merely a postponement of battle, but it gave them time to build their case. Time for James to potentially reveal his true priorities. "I'm appointing Morgan Chun as guardian ad litem," Judge Harlow continued. "Ms. Chun will conduct home visits, interview relevant parties, and provide a recommendation to this court within 30 days. Until then, the status quo remains in effect." She fixed both James and Samantha with a stern look. "I expect both parents to cooperate fully with Ms. Chen and to refrain from disparaging each other in the child's presence. We'll reconvene when Ms. Chen's report is complete." As they left the courtroom, Samantha caught James's expression, not anger or disappointment, but calculation. He was already formulating his next move, adjusting his strategy like the business chess master he was. "Round one to us," Diana murmured as they walked toward the exit. But James Hawthorne didn't build a billion-dollar company by accepting initial setbacks. "What do you think he'll do next?" Samantha asked, adjusting Lily in her carrier. "If I were him, I'd make sure the guardian ad litem sees exactly what he wants them to see. A devoted father who can provide everything a child could need." Diana's expression was grim. "Which means we need to make sure Miss Chun sees the truth instead." The first fractures in their marriage had appeared so gradually that Samantha barely noticed them forming. 3 years into their marriage, subtle suggestions began that certain photography clients weren't appropriate for the wife of James Hawthorne. "The Richardsons?" Samantha had questioned, reviewing the society family's request for her to photograph their daughter's debutante ball. "What's wrong with them?" "Nothing specifically," James had replied, not looking up from his laptop. "But Richard Richardson is competing for the same hospital contracts we are. It might send mixed messages if my wife is providing services to his family. My photography business isn't an extension of Hawthorne Innovations, James. It's my career." "Of course it is, sweetheart." His tone had been placating, the endearment a subtle diminishment. "But everything we do reflects on each other now. That's marriage." She declined the Richardsons' request, telling herself it was a reasonable compromise. Then came the board meetings scheduled during exhibitions she'd spent months preparing for. The charity galas that required her presence as Mrs. Hawthorne on the same evenings as client sessions she'd booked weeks in advance. "It's just business, Sam," became his mantra whenever she questioned these small erosions of her independence. "You know how important these negotiations are." The most telling change had been physical, the way her studio space in their home gradually shrank as his home office expanded. First, it was just storage boxes appearing in one corner of her darkroom. Then equipment she rarely used was relocated to make space for his growing collection of business awards and memorabilia. "We could convert the guest house," she'd suggested one evening, after finding her favorite backdrop stands had been moved to the garage. "Make it a proper studio. That way your office can have this entire wing." "That's not practical," James had dismissed immediately. "We need the guest house for visitors. Besides, you're doing fewer shoots these days anyway." The observation had been accurate but misleading. She was doing fewer shoots because her time was increasingly consumed by obligations as James's wife, hosting dinner parties for potential investors, attending endless corporate functions, managing the social calendar that seemed to expand with each quarter of Hawthorne Innovations' growth. By their 5th anniversary, Samantha's thriving photography business had dwindled to occasional passion projects. Her camera gathered dust while she gathered business connections for her husband. The transformation had been so gradual she hardly recognized it until a former client called, hoping to book her for a major advertising campaign. "I'm sorry, but Mrs. Hawthorne's schedule is quite full," James's personal assistant had interrupted, taking the call that had come to their home line. "Perhaps another photographer would be better suited to your timeline." Later, when Samantha had confronted him, James had seemed genuinely confused by her anger. "I thought you'd be relieved. That campaign would have taken weeks of your time, and we have the hospital board gala that month." "That should have been my decision to make," she'd argued, feeling something fundamental slipping away from her. "My career isn't a hobby to be scheduled around your convenience." "Of course not," he'd soothed, pulling her into an embrace that felt more restraining than comforting. "But our life together has to be the priority now. We're building something important, Sam. Something that will last generations." She'd relented, as she always did, telling herself that marriage required compromise, that James's vision was bigger than hers, more consequential, that supporting his dreams was an act of love. It wasn't until years later, sitting in Diana's office with Lily in her arms, that Samantha fully understood how completely she had surrendered her own identity, one small concession at a time. Morgan Chen, the court-appointed guardian ad litem, arrived at Samantha's apartment precisely at the scheduled time, her professional demeanor softened by kind eyes that immediately took in every detail of the modest but comfortable space. "Ms. Brooks, thank you for accommodating my visit," she said, accepting Samantha's offer of tea. "I'd like to observe your routine with Lily, if that's all right. Just go about your normal activities as much as possible." Samantha nodded, grateful that Lily had woken from her nap in a cheerful mood. "We usually have some floor time now, working on her rolling and sitting skills." For the next hour, Morgan observed as Samantha moved through their afternoon routine tummy time on the colorful play mat, songs and simple games, preparation of fresh baby food in the small but well-organized kitchen. She asked questions about Lily's schedule, health, development milestones, taking notes without judgment. "You mentioned you're rebuilding your photography business," Morgan said as Samantha settled Lily in her high chair for an early dinner. "How are you managing that with Lily's needs?" "I've restructured everything around her," Samantha explained, demonstrating how her portable office was set up in the living room, visible from every part of the open concept apartment. Client meetings happen during her morning nap or when Grace is available. "I've converted the second bedroom into a small studio for portrait sessions, so Lily can be nearby in her playpen." Morgan nodded, making notes. "And your financial situation?" "Family court considers stability in all forms. I have 3 regular corporate clients now, plus wedding bookings most weekends. My parents left me a modest inheritance that provided a cushion while I re-established myself." Samantha hesitated, then added, "I'm not wealthy like James, but I'm building something sustainable that allows me to be present for Lily. Present is an interesting word choice, Morgan observed. Can you elaborate? James can provide Lily with every material advantage. The best schools, extracurricular activities, travel opportunities. What he can't provide is himself. Samantha chose her words carefully, aware of the fine line between honest assessment and appearing vindictive. Even before our separation, he was rarely home before Lily's bedtime. His work has always come first. That's a common challenge for many executives, Morgan noted neutrally. The difference is that James doesn't see it as a challenge to overcome. He sees it as the natural order of things. His career takes precedence, and others adapt around it. Samantha met Morgan's gaze directly, including his daughter. As the visit concluded, Morgan paused at the door. I'll be seeing Lily with her father tomorrow. Is there anything specific about her routine or preferences I should know to make the transition smoother? The question revealed a compassion that gave Samantha hope. This wasn't just a procedural evaluation. Morgan genuinely cared about Lily's experience. She gets overwhelmed with too much stimulation, Samantha offered. James tends to overcompensate during his limited time with her. Too many toys, too many activities. It usually ends with her overtired and fussy. Morgan made a final note. Thank you for your candor, Ms. Brooks. I'll be in touch if I have additional questions. After she left, Samantha sat with Lily on her lap, the baby contentedly playing with a wooden teething ring. What do you think, little one? Did we make a good impression? Lily responded with a drooly smile that momentarily eased the knot of anxiety in Samantha's chest. Whatever performance James might orchestrate tomorrow, Morgan Chun struck her as someone who could see beyond surface appearances to the truth beneath. The truth that had taken Samantha herself too long to recognize, that love wasn't measured in material provisions or social advantages, but in the consistent, ordinary moments of care that built a child's sense of security and worth. When Samantha discovered she was pregnant after years of trying, she had hoped the baby would bring back the James she'd fallen in love with. For a few precious months, it seemed to work. He attended every doctor's appointment, converted a room adjacent to their bedroom into a nursery, even suggested she set up a new darkroom to document their child's early years. This changes everything, he'd whispered the first time he felt the baby kick, his hand warm against Samantha's rounded belly. Nothing matters more than family. She'd believed him, had seen the wonder in his eyes during ultrasound appointments, had felt his genuine excitement as they prepared for their child's arrival. For the first time in years, James had seemed fully present. His ambition temporarily redirected from corporate conquest to creating the perfect environment for their baby. The nursery had been his special project, designed with the same attention to detail he brought to product launches. He'd consulted with child development experts, researched the safest materials, created a space that was both beautiful and functional. When he presented the completed room to Samantha, pride radiating from him, she'd glimpsed again the man she'd married, someone capable of seeing beyond balance sheets to the human experiences that gave life meaning. I want our child to have everything, he'd told her, his arm around her expanding waist as they stood in the doorway of the perfect nursery. Not just material things, but the security of knowing they're cherished, that they matter more than any business deal or corporate milestone. Lily Grace Hawthorne arrived during a spring thunderstorm, tiny and perfect with her father's intense blue eyes and her mother's determined chin. James had held his daughter with wonder, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. She's miraculous, he'd whispered, one finger gently tracing the curve of Lily's cheek. How did we create something so perfect? For 6 weeks, he'd been the devoted father Samantha had always imagined, rearranging meetings to be home for bedtime, bringing work home rather than staying late at the office. He'd learned to change diapers, prepare bottles, soothe Lily's fussing with a patience Samantha had never seen him display in business contexts. Then Hawthorne Innovations had faced its first major crisis under his leadership. A competitor filed a patent infringement lawsuit that threatened their newest cardiac device, and with it, the company's future. James disappeared into 18-hour workdays, emergency board meetings, and closed-door strategy sessions with his legal team. It's temporary, he'd promised, kissing Samantha's forehead distractedly as he left before dawn. Once this is resolved, everything goes back to normal. But normal never returned. As the lawsuit dragged on, James's absences grew longer, his rare appearances at home more distracted. Chloe Davis, his newly hired executive assistant, began calling the house at all hours, her voice growing increasingly familiar, increasingly intimate. "James asked me to let you know he won't be home tonight," became a regular message, delivered with a subtle note of satisfaction that made Samantha's skin crawl. The night Samantha found the text messages, Lily was 4 months old and running a fever. She'd been trying to reach James for hours, increasingly worried about their daughter's listless whimpering. When his phone went straight to voicemail for the 12th time, she'd used his tablet to email him, and found the message thread with Chloe still open. "I've never felt this way about anyone. What we have is real. I know, but I need time to figure out how to handle this. She doesn't deserve to be hurt. You deserve happiness. We deserve a chance." The words blurred through her tears as Samantha scrolled through months of exchanges, watching her marriage unravel in digital form. The intimate details shared, the plans made, the complaints about her postpartum depression, her obsession with the baby, her failure to understand the pressures he faced. When James finally came home near midnight, Samantha was sitting in the darkened living room. Lily finally sleeping peacefully after a dose of infant Tylenol had broken her fever. "How long?" she'd asked simply, no preamble needed. James hadn't bothered denying it. "It just happened, Sam. I didn't plan this." "How long?" 6 months. He'd looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Since before Lily was born. The betrayal had stolen her breath more effectively than any physical blow. While she'd been creating life, he'd been destroying everything they'd built together. "I want a divorce," she'd said, the words falling between them like stones into still water. "Let's not be hasty." James had shifted immediately into negotiation mode, the tone he used to salvage business deals. "We can work through this. For Lily's sake. Don't you dare use our daughter to justify your betrayal." Samantha's voice had remained steady despite the earthquake demolishing her world. "You weren't thinking about Lily when you were with her." "I'll end it with Chloe," he'd offered, as though it were a generous concession. "We can go to counseling. Start fresh." But Samantha had seen something in his eyes that night. Not remorse for the affair, but calculation. The same expression he wore when assessing a business risk, weighing potential losses against necessary sacrifices. "I'm not a problem to be managed, James. I'm the woman you promised to love and honor. The mother of your child." She'd stood then, Lily cradled protectively against her chest. "And I deserve better than this." The weeks that followed had revealed just how thoroughly James Hawthorne approached the dissolution of a marriage. The same strategic brilliance that had built his empire was now deployed against her. Financial accounts she'd had access to for years suddenly required passwords she didn't possess. Credit cards were declined without warning. The housekeeper and nanny both resigned on the same day, citing professional opportunities elsewhere. When Samantha had confronted him, James's response chilled her. "I built everything we have. Did you really think I wouldn't protect it?" She'd moved out the next day, taking only her personal belongings, her photography equipment, and everything Lily needed. The modest inheritance from her parents, kept in a separate account James had once called unnecessarily independent, provided enough for a small apartment and basic necessities while she rebuilt the career she'd allowed to wither. Morgan Chen's report arrived exactly 30 days after her appointment as guardian ad litem. Diana called Samantha immediately. "It's complicated," Diana said, her voice carefully neutral. "Can you come to my office this afternoon?" 3 hours later, with Lily contentedly exploring a basket of toys in Diana's office, Samantha read through the detailed assessment of both households and parenting styles. Morgan had been thorough and fair, documenting the strengths and weaknesses of each parent with clinical precision. James's home was described as exceptionally well appointed for a child's development, with every material resource available. His interactions with Lily were noted as attentive though somewhat performative, and focused on stimulation rather than connection. Most tellingly, Morgan had observed that during her visit, James had taken 3 business calls, each lasting over 15 minutes, leaving Lily with the nanny despite the scheduled observation. Samantha's home was characterized as modest but thoughtfully organized around the child's needs, with evidence of consistent routines and developmentally appropriate activities. Her interactions with Lily were described as natural, responsive, and securely attached. The conclusion, however, was not the unequivocal recommendation Samantha had hoped for. While Ms. Brooks demonstrates stronger day-to-day parenting skills and a more secure attachment with Lily, Mr. Hawthorne offers significant advantages in terms of resources, educational opportunities, and extended family support. A shared custody arrangement would potentially allow Lily to benefit from both parents' strengths. Diana watched Samantha's face as she finished reading. It's not what we wanted, but it's not what James wanted either. Morgan is recommending a 65-35 split, with you having primary physical custody and James having Lily 3 weekends per month plus 1 overnight during the week. That's more than he has now, Samantha said slowly, processing the implications. But less than he was demanding. Exactly. It's a compromise that acknowledges your role as primary caregiver while giving weight to the advantages James can provide. Diana leaned forward. The question is, do we accept this recommendation or fight for more at the hearing? Samantha looked at Lily, now babbling happily to herself as she stacked colorful blocks. What are our chances if we push for more? Honestly, it depends on the judge. Morgan's report is balanced enough that Judge Harlow could reasonably rule either way. If we accept the recommendation, we secure your position as primary custodian. If we fight, Diana hesitated. James has the resources to drag this out indefinitely. And Lily is caught in the middle the entire time. Samantha sighed, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. What would you do if it were your child? Diana removed her glasses, her professional demeanor softening. I'd secure primary custody now and build from there. Once the court establishes you as the primary parent, it becomes the status quo. Any future modifications would require James to prove a significant change in circumstances. So we accept the recommendation? Strategically, yes, but with one important addition. Diana's expression turned shrewd. We request that the court formally acknowledge the timeline of James's relationship with Chloe, specifically that it began during your pregnancy. It may not change the custody recommendation, but it creates an official record of his character that could be valuable if he ever seeks to modify the arrangement. Samantha nodded, a plan forming in her mind. And we request first right of refusal for childcare. Meaning, if James can't personally be with Lily during his parenting time, I get offered the opportunity to care for her before he can use the nanny or his mother. Samantha straightened, feeling more in control than she had in months. If he's truly committed to being an involved father, he'll have no objection. If this is about control rather than parenting, we'll see it in his response. Diana smiled, a flash of admiration in her eyes. Exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. I'll draft our response today. As Samantha gathered Lily and prepared to leave, Diana added, There's one more thing you should know. Morgan noted in her report that during her visit with James, she observed tension between James's mother and Chloe. Apparently, Eleanor Hawthorne doesn't entirely approve of her son's new relationship, or how it began. That's surprising. Eleanor has always supported James unconditionally. Even the most supportive mothers have their limits, it seems. It might be nothing, but it's an interesting dynamic to be aware of. Samantha considered this unexpected information as she strapped Lily into her car seat. Eleanor Hawthorne had always been politely distant during their marriage, respectful but never warm, as though reserving judgment on whether Samantha was truly worthy of her son. The idea that she might disapprove of Chloe was intriguing, a potential crack in James's carefully constructed narrative of his perfect new life. The custody hearing was scheduled for a crisp October morning, the Atlanta skyline visible through the courthouse windows as Samantha prepared for what Diana had described as the performance of your life. Remember, Diana murmured as they waited outside the courtroom, Judge Harlow will be watching not just what you say, but how you interact with James, with Lily, with the entire process. Every expression, every gesture communicates something about your character and priorities. Samantha nodded, adjusting Lily on her hip. At 10 months old, her daughter was becoming more aware of her surroundings, her curious eyes taking in the unfamiliar environment with interest rather than anxiety. Samantha had dressed her in a simple but pretty outfit, nothing ostentatious that might suggest using her as a prop, but neat and well cared for to counter any impression of neglect. James arrived with his usual entourage, Bradford Mills, Chloe at his side despite the inappropriateness of her presence at a custody hearing, and to Samantha's surprise, Eleanor Hawthorne. The older woman's expression was unreadable as she approached, her attention focused entirely on Lily. "She's grown so much," Eleanor said softly, reaching out to touch Lily's cheek. "She has your chin, Samantha. Would you like to hold her?" Samantha offered, recognizing the genuine longing in the older woman's eyes. "She's been asking for Gamma when we look at photos." Something flickered across Eleanor's face. Surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. "You show her my picture?" "Of course. You're her grandmother, regardless of what's happening between James and me." Eleanor took Lily carefully, her practiced elegance momentarily softening as the baby patted her face with curious hands. "Hello, precious girl. Grandma's missed you." From across the hallway, Samantha caught James watching the interaction, his expression complex, part irritation, part confusion, as though he hadn't anticipated this moment of connection between his mother and his estranged wife. Inside the courtroom, Judge Harlow reviewed Morgan Chen's report thoroughly before addressing both parties. "I've considered Ms. Chen's recommendations carefully. Before making my ruling, I'd like to hear directly from both parents regarding their acceptance or objections to the proposed arrangement." Bradford Mills rose first. "Your Honor, while Mr. Hawthorne appreciates Ms. Chen's diligence, he believes the proposed 65-35 split undervalues the significant advantages he can provide for Lily's development and future opportunities. We respectfully request a 50-50 shared custody arrangement as more equitable and beneficial for the child." Judge Harlow's expression remained neutral as she turned to Diana. "Ms. Abernathy? Your Honor, Ms. Brooks is prepared to accept Ms. Chen's recommendation regarding the physical custody split, with two important additions." Diana outlined their requests: the formal acknowledgement of James's affair during Samantha's pregnancy and the first right of refusal for childcare during his parenting time. Judge Harlow considered this, then addressed James directly. "Mr. Hawthorne, do you have any objection to the first right of refusal provision?" James conferred briefly with Mills before responding. "Your Honor, while I appreciate Ms. Brooks's desire to maximize her time with our daughter, such an arrangement would be logistically complicated given my work schedule and would potentially disrupt Lily's routine. The nanny and my mother provide consistent care that allows for stability during my parenting time. So your objection is based on convenience rather than principle?" Judge Harlow's tone was neutral, but her question cut to the heart of the matter. "My objection is based on what's best for Lily," James replied smoothly. "Consistency and stability are paramount at her age." Judge Harlow made a note, then addressed the second request. "Regarding the formal acknowledgement of the timeline of Mr. Hawthorne's relationship with Ms. Davis, Mr. Mills, your response?" Mills rose again. "Your Honor, the circumstances of Mr. Hawthorne's current relationship are irrelevant to his ability to parent effectively. We object to this request as an attempt to prejudice the court against my client based on personal matters unrelated to custody considerations." "Ms. Abernathy?" Judge Harlow turned to Diana. "Your Honor, character and judgment are absolutely relevant to parenting. Mr. Hawthorne began an extramarital affair while his wife was pregnant with their child. This speaks directly to his priorities and decision-making, both of which impact his daughter's well-being." The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harlow considered both arguments. Finally, she spoke. "I'm prepared to rule on the custody arrangement. Based on Ms. Chen's report and the arguments presented today, I find that Lily's best interests are served by maintaining Ms. Brooks as her primary custodial parent." Samantha felt a wave of relief wash over her, though she kept her expression composed. The court orders a custody split of 70-30, with Ms. Brooks having primary physical custody and Mr. Hawthorne having Lily 2 weekends per month, plus 1 overnight visit during the week. Judge Harlow's voice was firm as she continued. Additionally, the court grants Ms. Brooks first right of refusal for childcare during Mr. Hawthorne's parenting time, with a minimum 2-hour notice required except in emergencies. James's jaw tightened visibly, but he remained silent as the judge continued. Regarding the request for formal acknowledgement of Mr. Hawthorne's relationship timeline, the court notes for the record that this relationship began during Ms. Brooks's pregnancy, a fact not disputed by either party. While this does not directly impact the custody determination, it is relevant to the court's assessment of judgment and character. Judge Harlow looked directly at James. Mr. Hawthorne, this court recognizes your ability to provide material advantages for your daughter. However, parenting is about more than resources. It requires presence, consistency, and prioritizing a child's needs above one's own. Ms. Chen's report indicates areas where growth is needed in your parenting approach. Turning to Samantha, her expression softened slightly. Ms. Brooks, the court acknowledges your commitment to maintaining Lily's relationship with her father despite difficult circumstances. Continue to foster that connection. It remains vital to her development. With a final tap of her gavel, Judge Harlow concluded, this arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months to assess its effectiveness and make any necessary adjustments. Court is adjourned. As they gathered their belongings, Diana squeezed Samantha's arm. This is a significant victory. The 70-30 split is better than Chen's recommendation, and the first right of refusal gives you practical control over much more than 70% of Lily's time, given James's schedule. Samantha nodded, the full impact of the ruling still sinking in. What happens now? Now we formalize the parenting plan, specific days, holiday schedules, exchange procedures, and you continue building your life on your terms. Diana smiled. Speaking of which, how's the exhibition coming along? Almost ready. Samantha felt a flutter of nervous excitement. The gallery confirmed for next month. 12 pieces exploring identity and invisibility in women's lives. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As they left the courtroom, Samantha noticed Eleanor Hawthorne waiting in the hallway, her elegant posture at odds with the uncertainty in her expression. Samantha, she called softly, may I speak with you for a moment? Diana gave Samantha a questioning look, but Samantha nodded reassuringly. I'll meet you at the car. Eleanor approached, her gaze fixed on Lily, who was now dozing against Samantha's shoulder. I want you to know, she began, her voice low, that I don't approve of how James has handled any of this. The affair, the way he's tried to take Lily from you, it's not how I raised him. Samantha studied the older woman's face, seeing genuine distress beneath her composed exterior. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. I'd like to see her, Eleanor continued. Not just during James's time. Perhaps we could arrange something separate. The request surprised Samantha, but she found herself nodding. I think Lily would like that. She should know her grandmother, regardless of what's happening between her parents. Relief softened Eleanor's features. Thank you. And Samantha, the exhibition, your photography show next month. I'd like to attend, if that wouldn't be uncomfortable for you. How did you know about that? A small smile touched Eleanor's lips. I followed your career more closely than you might imagine. James may have forgotten the woman he fell in love with, but I never did. As Eleanor walked away to where James and Chloe waited by the elevators, Samantha felt an unexpected sense of alliance forming, not just with Diana or Morgan Chen, but with this elegant woman who had chosen, in her own quiet way, to stand for what was right rather than what was convenient. Have you ever discovered your worth after someone failed to see it? Comment below with the moment you realized you deserved better. The weeks following the custody hearing brought a new rhythm to Samantha's life. With the court order in place, James's attempts to control her through Lily diminished, replaced by a grudging adherence to the parenting schedule. The first right of refusal provision proved its value immediately. Within the first month, James called 5 times to ask if Samantha could take Lily during his scheduled time, due to unavoidable business commitments. Each time, Samantha agreed without comment, simply grateful for the additional time with her daughter. Each instance was carefully documented in the journal she continued to maintain, building a record that might prove valuable during the 6-month review. Meanwhile, her photography business continued to grow, her reputation for capturing authentic emotion attracting clients who valued substance over glossy perfection. The exhibition, titled Invisible Women, had evolved from a personal project into something more ambitious, a series exploring the gradual erasure of women's identities within marriages to powerful men. "It's powerful work," remarked Vanessa Kingsley, the gallery owner who had agreed to show Samantha's pieces. "Uncomfortable, but in all the right ways. You're making visible something many women experience but few can articulate." The centerpiece of the exhibition was a triptych titled Diminishment, 3 self-portraits taken at different stages of Samantha's marriage to James. The first showed her as she'd been when they met, eyes bright with confidence, camera in hand, fully present in her own skin. The second captured her 3 years into their marriage, beautifully dressed at a corporate function, her expression pleasant but vacant, a perfect accessory to her husband's success. The third, taken shortly after discovering James's affair, revealed raw pain but also the first glimmers of reclaimed strength, her gaze direct and unflinching. "You've exposed yourself completely here," Diana observed during a private preview of the exhibition. "Are you prepared for James's reaction when he sees these?" "I'm not sure he will see them," Samantha replied, adjusting the lighting on one of the portraits. "Art exhibitions aren't exactly his priority. Don't underestimate his awareness of anything that might affect his public image. These photographs tell a story he'd prefer remained private." Samantha considered this, studying the triptych thoughtfully. "Maybe that's exactly why they need to be seen. Not just my story, but the story of so many women who disappear into the shadows of the men they marry." The night of the exhibition opening arrived with unexpected momentum. A feature in Atlanta's Arts magazine had generated interest beyond Samantha's usual circles, drawing a diverse crowd of art enthusiasts, gallery regulars, and several prominent women from Atlanta's business community. Samantha moved through the space in a simple black dress that projected quiet confidence, answering questions about her process and inspiration with a candor that resonated with many attendees. Several women approached her privately, sharing their own experiences of gradual erasure within relationships with powerful men. "You've captured exactly how it happens," one woman whispered, tears in her eyes as she gazed at a photograph titled Shrinking Room, an image of Samantha's studio space being gradually consumed by encroaching shadows. "So slowly you don't notice until you've nearly disappeared." Midway through the evening, Samantha spotted Eleanor Hawthorne entering the gallery, elegant in a dove-gray suit that somehow managed to be both understated and commanding. To Samantha's surprise, Eleanor wasn't alone. She was accompanied by Catherine Westfield, one of Atlanta's most influential art critics and a longtime board member of the High Museum. The two women moved methodically through the exhibition, pausing longest before the most challenging pieces. Catherine took notes occasionally, her expression thoughtful, while Eleanor maintained the perfect composure that had been her hallmark throughout Samantha's marriage to her son. When they finally approached Samantha, Catherine spoke first. "This is remarkable work, Ms. Brooks. You've managed to make something deeply personal resonate as universally political without sacrificing either dimension." "Thank you," Samantha replied, genuinely moved by the assessment from someone whose opinion carried such weight in the art world. "That balance was important to me. I'd like to write about this exhibition," Catherine continued. "Would you be available for an interview next week?" Before Samantha could respond, the gallery's atmosphere shifted perceptibly. She turned to see James standing in the entrance, his expression darkening as he took in the crowded space and the photographs on display. Chloe was notably absent, a calculated decision, Samantha suspected, to avoid providing additional fodder for the narrative the exhibition was already constructing. "I should greet my son," Eleanor said quietly. "Catherine, perhaps you could continue your conversation with Samantha while I attend to this?" As Eleanor moved gracefully toward James, Catherine smiled conspiratorially. "Eleanor mentioned you might appreciate some positive press." I'm happy to oblige. Your work deserves recognition entirely on its merits. Across the room, Samantha watched as Eleanor intercepted James, her hand on his arm guiding him toward a less provocative series of landscapes rather than the more personal portraits. His body language radiated tension, but he allowed himself to be directed, perhaps unwilling to create a scene in such a public setting. Your former mother-in-law is quite the strategist, Catherine observed, following Samantha's gaze. She contacted me specifically about your exhibition, said it was important work that deserved serious critical attention. This revelation stunned Samantha. Eleanor did that? Indeed. She's been a significant patron of the arts for years, though usually quite quietly. Her support carries weight. Catherine's shrewd eyes assessed Samantha's surprise. You didn't know? No, During my marriage, Eleanor was always polite but distant. I never imagined she'd advocate for my work this way. People are full of surprises, especially women of Eleanor's generation. They've navigated waters you and I can barely imagine. Catherine handed Samantha her card. My assistant will call to arrange the interview. In the meantime, congratulations on a powerful debut. As Catherine moved away to examine another photograph, Samantha found herself approached by James, who had apparently escaped his mother's diplomatic intervention. Quite a show you've put together, he said, his voice low and controlled despite the anger evident in his eyes. Very creative interpretation of our marriage. It's not an interpretation, James. It's documentation. Samantha kept her tone neutral, aware of the other guests within earshot. Art reflects truth as the artist experiences it, and exploits private matters for public consumption? His gaze flickered to the triptych, lingering on the final image with its raw emotional exposure. This isn't just about you, Samantha. Have you considered how this affects Lily? How people will look at her, knowing these intimate details about her parents? The question was calculated to strike at her deepest vulnerability, her concern for Lily's well-being. For a moment, doubt flickered through her, but then she remembered Diana's warning about James's tactics, his ability to weaponize her own compassion against her. Lily will grow up knowing her mother found her voice again, Samantha replied steadily, that when life shattered her expectations, she created something meaningful from the pieces. I think that's a legacy worth sharing. James studied her with narrowed eyes, perhaps recognizing that the woman before him was not the same one he had so easily manipulated during their marriage. Catherine Westfield is here. I assume my mother arranged that. Apparently so. A complex emotion crossed his face, frustration mingled with a reluctant respect. Mother always did have her own agenda. I just never expected it to diverge so dramatically from mine. Perhaps she sees something you don't. What I see, James replied, his voice hardening, is my private life displayed for strangers' entertainment, my character assassinated through selective imagery. No, James. What you're seeing is the consequence of your choices reflected back at you. Samantha gestured to the photographs surrounding them. Every image here is true. If the truth damages your reputation, perhaps the problem isn't with the mirror. Before he could respond, Vanessa approached with an excited expression. Samantha, I need you to meet someone. The director of the Brennan Foundation is here. They're interested in discussing a potential grant for expanding this series into a book. James's jaw tightened at this evidence of the exhibition's success. Congratulations, he said stiffly. It seems you've found your audience. As he walked away, Samantha felt a strange mixture of emotions of vindication, certainly, but also an unexpected pang of something like grief for the man she had once believed him to be, the partnership they might have had if ambition and control hadn't corrupted his capacity for genuine connection. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of introductions, conversations about her process, and several red dots appearing beside photographs as collectors made purchases. By the time the last guests departed, Samantha found herself emotionally and physically exhausted, but filled with a sense of accomplishment that transcended the exhibition's commercial success. 7 pieces sold, 3 commission requests, and the Brennan Foundation interested in a book project. Vanessa summarized as they shared a quiet glass of champagne in the empty gallery. not to mention Catherine Westfield's attention. By any measure, this is an extraordinary debut. It doesn't feel quite real, Samantha admitted, gazing at the photographs that had externalized her most private pain and transformation. 6 months ago, I was fighting just to keep my daughter. Now you're reclaiming every part of yourself, Vanessa finished for her, including the artist you put aside for too long. Later that night, after relieving Grace from babysitting duties and checking on Lily's peaceful sleep, Samantha sat in the quiet of her small living room and allowed herself to fully process the evening's significance. The exhibition wasn't just a professional milestone, it was a declaration of her refusal to remain invisible, to have her story controlled or diminished by James's power and influence. Her phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Opening it, she found a simple message. "You've found your focus again. I always knew you would. Eleanor." The unexpected alliance with her former mother-in-law still felt surreal, but also strangely fitting. Two women who had navigated life with James Hawthorne and emerged with their own perspectives intact. Samantha typed a response, "Thank you for coming tonight, and for Catherine Westfield." The reply came quickly, "Your talent did the real work. I merely made an introduction. Lily has her mother's strength. I'm glad for that." Setting down her phone, Samantha moved to the window overlooking the city lights. The path ahead still held challenges. Co-parenting with James would never be simple, and rebuilding her career while raising Lily alone would require constant balancing. But for the first time since discovering James's betrayal, she felt fully capable of meeting those challenges on her own terms. The woman who had walked into the divorce attorney's office with a baby in her arms, confronted with her husband's new fiancée wearing her family heirloom, had been shattered by betrayal but not destroyed by it. Instead, she had gathered the fragments of her former self and reassembled them into something stronger, clearer, and uncompromisingly authentic. The 6-month review hearing arrived on a bright spring morning, with Lily now walking confidently and beginning to form simple sentences. At 16 months old, she was a spirited, observant child who moved through the world with the same quiet determination Samantha had once possessed and was now reclaiming. The courtroom felt different this time, less intimidating, more familiar. Samantha sat beside Diana with a confidence that hadn't been present during the initial custody battle, her documentation meticulously organized, her understanding of the legal process much clearer. James arrived with Bradford Mills but without Chloe, whose absence was notable given her constant presence during previous proceedings. Samantha wondered briefly about the change but focused on maintaining her composure as Judge Harlow entered the courtroom. "We're here to review the custody arrangement established 6 months ago for Lily Hawthorne," Judge Harlow began, reviewing the file before her. "I've received reports from both parties regarding the implementation of the parenting plan. Before making any determinations, I'd like to hear directly from each of you about how the arrangement is working." James spoke first, his testimony carefully constructed to emphasize his commitment to Lily while subtly suggesting that the current arrangement limited his ability to fully parent her. "While I've treasured my time with my daughter, Your Honor, the restricted schedule has made it difficult to establish the kind of consistent relationship I believe she deserves with her father. The frequent transitions between households seem to confuse her, and I believe a more equal time-sharing arrangement would provide greater stability." Judge Harlow listened attentively, then turned to Samantha. "Ms. Brooks, your assessment of the current arrangement?" "Your Honor, the past 6 months have shown that the 70-30 split provides Lily with the stability of a primary home while maintaining a meaningful relationship with her father." Samantha presented her documentation, a detailed calendar showing every scheduled visit, including the 12 occasions when James had invoked the first right of refusal provision due to work commitments. "As you can see, Mr. Hawthorne has been unable to personally care for Lily during approximately 40% of his allocated parenting time. This isn't a criticism. His work is demanding and important. But it does demonstrate that increasing his parenting time would primarily mean increasing Lily's time with caregivers, rather than with her father." Judge Harlow reviewed the calendar thoughtfully. "Mr. Hawthorne, would you like to respond to this documentation?" James conferred briefly with Mills before addressing the court. "Your Honor, While my professional responsibilities do occasionally require schedule adjustments, I've made significant efforts to reorganize my priorities since our last hearing. I've implemented a new policy at Hawthorne Innovations limiting evening meetings and have declined 3 international trips specifically to maintain my parenting schedule with Lily. That's commendable, Judge Harlow acknowledged. However, the documentation suggests these adjustments haven't fully addressed the issue. She turned back to Samantha. Beyond the scheduling concerns, how would you characterize Lily's relationship with her father? Lily loves her father, Samantha replied honestly. When James is fully present with her, they have a beautiful connection. My concern isn't about their relationship but about consistency and priorities. Judge Harlow nodded, making notes before addressing both parents. Has there been any significant change in circumstances that would warrant modifying the current arrangement? This was the critical legal standard. Without a substantial change in circumstances, courts typically maintained existing custody orders to provide stability for the child. Yes, Your Honor, James responded immediately. My mother has permanently relocated to Atlanta specifically to support Lily's care, providing additional family stability. Furthermore, I've adjusted my work schedule to accommodate more consistent parenting time, as I've mentioned. Ms. Brooks, Judge Harlow turned to Samantha. Your Honor, while Mr. Hawthorne's mother's relocation is positive for Lily, it doesn't constitute a change in circumstances that would justify disrupting the stability Lily has in her current arrangement. The documentation shows that despite his stated intentions, Mr. Hawthorne's work continues to take precedence over his parenting time in practice. Judge Harlow considered both arguments, reviewing the file once more before delivering her ruling. Having considered the evidence presented and the best interests of the child, the court finds insufficient change in circumstances to warrant modification of the existing custody arrangement. The 70-30 split will remain in effect, with Ms. Brooks maintaining primary physical custody. Relief washed through Samantha, though she kept her expression neutral out of respect for the proceedings. However, Judge Harlow continued, the court acknowledges Mr. Hawthorne's efforts to adjust his schedule and encourages continued flexibility between both parents to maximize Lily's time with each of you when possible. She fixed both of them with a stern look. Co-parenting requires communication and compromise. I expect both of you to prioritize Lily's needs above any personal conflicts. As the hearing concluded, Samantha gathered her documents, aware of James's tightly controlled frustration across the aisle. This was the second time his resources and influence had failed to secure the outcome he wanted, an unfamiliar experience for a man accustomed to bending circumstances to his will. Outside the courtroom, as Diana conferred with the court clerk about finalizing the order, James approached Samantha directly. This isn't over, he said quietly, his tone more resigned than threatening. I'll continue to pursue what's best for Lily. I know you will, Samantha replied, surprising herself with the genuine understanding in her voice. And despite our differences, I believe you love her. That's something I've never doubted, James. He studied her face, perhaps searching for manipulation or sarcasm, but finding only sincerity. Your exhibition, he said after a moment. Catherine Westfield's review was significant. The review had indeed been significant, a full-page feature in the arts section of Atlanta's major newspaper, describing Samantha's work as a powerful exploration of female identity and resilience, and positioning her as an important emerging voice in contemporary photography. It was generous, Samantha acknowledged. It was accurate, James corrected, surprising her. Whatever else has happened between us, your talent was never in question. He hesitated, something like regret flickering across his features. I never gave it the space it deserved. The admission, however limited, was unexpected, a small acknowledgement of his role in diminishing her career during their marriage. Thank you for saying that, Samantha said simply. James nodded once, then glanced at his watch. I have a board meeting. Please tell Lily I'll see her Friday as scheduled. As James walked away, Samantha felt a subtle shift in their dynamic, not reconciliation or forgiveness, but perhaps the first tentative step toward a more functional co-parenting relationship. His acknowledgement of her talent, however brief, suggested a capacity for reflection she hadn't been certain he possessed. Diana rejoined her, eyebrows raised questioningly. "Everything okay?" "I think so," Samantha replied, still processing the interaction. "He actually acknowledged my exhibition. Said Catherine's review was accurate." "Interesting." Diana studied her client's expression. "Just be careful. James Hawthorne doesn't concede ground unless he sees strategic advantage in doing so." "I know." Samantha gathered her belongings, ready to pick up Lily from Grace's apartment. "But for Lily's sake, I'll take civility wherever I can find it." The success of Invisible Women created ripples that extended far beyond the gallery walls. Catherine Westfield's review led to features in several national arts publications, and the Brennan Foundation grant materialized into a book project documenting women's experiences of identity erasure across different socio-economic backgrounds. Samantha found herself balancing motherhood with a suddenly accelerating career, grateful for the flexibility photography allowed and for Grace's continued support with childcare. The modest apartment near Piedmont Park remained their home, though she had converted the small second bedroom into a proper office now that Lily slept in a toddler bed in Samantha's room. "You could afford something larger now," Diana observed during a casual lunch 6 weeks after the review hearing. "The book advance alone would cover a down payment in several nice neighborhoods." "I'm saving for something specific," Samantha replied, showing Diana photos on her phone of a Victorian house with a carriage house in the back. "It needs work, but the carriage house would make a perfect studio, and it's still in Lily's school district." "Smart planning," Diana approved. "Speaking of planning, have you thought about the holiday schedule? Thanksgiving is only a month away." The question sobered Samantha immediately. The parenting plan specified alternating holidays, with James having Lily for Thanksgiving this year, her first major holiday away from Samantha. "I'm trying not to think about it," she admitted. "The idea of waking up on Thanksgiving without her." She trailed off, the prospect still painful to contemplate. "Have you considered proposing a shared arrangement? Many families split the day, morning with one parent, evening with the other." James would never agree. He's planning some elaborate Thanksgiving at his mother's estate. Eleanor mentioned it during our last visit. The relationship between Samantha and Eleanor had evolved into something unexpected, not quite friendship, but a respectful alliance centered on Lily's well-being. Their monthly lunches had become a neutral space for sharing information about Lily's development and subtly coordinating approaches to James's more difficult tendencies. "Eleanor might be your ally in this," Diana suggested. "She seems to value your relationship with Lily." "Maybe." Samantha sipped her tea thoughtfully. "I'll bring it up at our lunch next week." The conversation shifted to Diana's recent engagement and wedding plans, but Samantha's thoughts lingered on the approaching holiday and the continuing challenge of sharing Lily's childhood with a man who viewed parenting as another arena for control and acquisition rather than nurturing and connection. The Victorian house became Samantha's in early November, the closing scheduled deliberately during one of James's weekends with Lily. The timing allowed Samantha to begin the essential renovations without disrupting her daughter's routine, focusing first on making the carriage house functional as a studio space. "It's perfect," Vanessa declared during her first visit to the property, wandering through the spacious carriage house with its north-facing windows and original hardwood floors. "The light in here is extraordinary. You'll be able to do client sessions and your personal work without compromise." "That's the idea." Samantha surveyed the space, already envisioning the transformation. "The main house needs more work, but we can live there comfortably while I renovate gradually. The important thing is that Lily will have a real yard to play in, and I'll have dedicated space for my work." "Speaking of your work," Vanessa pulled a folder from her bag. "I have news. The Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago wants to include 3 pieces from Invisible Women in their upcoming exhibition on gender and power. It's a major show with international artists." Samantha stared at the formal invitation, momentarily speechless. "Chicago? A museum exhibition? Your work is resonating, Samantha. This is just the beginning." Vanessa squeezed her arm encouragingly. "The exhibition opens in January. They'll cover your travel expenses for the opening reception." The opportunity was extraordinary validation of her artistic vision at an institutional level, exposure to curators and collectors far beyond Atlanta's art scene. Yet Samantha's first thought was of the practical implications for Lily. "I'd need to be away for at least 2 days," she calculated aloud. "It's not during James's scheduled weekend. Could Grace watch Lily? Or perhaps Eleanor? Possibly." Samantha tucked the invitation into her pocket, determined to find a solution. "I'll make it work somehow. This is too important to miss." Later that evening, as she reviewed renovation estimates at her kitchen table, Samantha's phone rang with James's number, an unusual occurrence, as they typically communicated about Lily via text or email to maintain a record of all agreements. "James?" she answered, immediately concerned. "Is Lily okay?" "She's fine," he assured her quickly. "Asleep already. I'm calling about Thanksgiving." Samantha tensed, preparing for some new complication to the holiday schedule. "What about it?" Mother suggested something that makes sense. He sounded reluctant, as though the idea didn't originate with him. "She thought perhaps you might join us for Thanksgiving dinner. For Lily's sake, so she doesn't have to be separated from either parent on the holiday." The invitation was so unexpected that Samantha momentarily wondered if she'd misheard. "You want me to come to Thanksgiving at Eleanor's?" "It's not my preference," James admitted with characteristic bluntness. "But Mother made a compelling case that it would be easier for Lily. And since you and Mother have whatever it is you have going on, she thought you might be amenable." Samantha considered the proposal carefully. Spending Thanksgiving with James and Chloe was hardly her idea of a celebration, but the alternative was a day without Lily. Would Chloe be comfortable with this arrangement? A telling pause followed. "Chloe won't be joining us. She's visiting her parents in California." Interesting, Samantha thought, filing away this information about the apparent distance between James and his fiancée. "In that case, yes, I think it would be good for Lily to have both of us there." "Fine. Dinner is at 4. Mother suggested you might want to come earlier, around noon, so Lily has time to settle." His tone remained businesslike, but without the underlying hostility that had characterized their interactions during the custody battle. "The renovation on your new house, is it progressing as planned?" The question caught her off guard. James rarely expressed interest in her life beyond matters directly affecting Lily. "Yes, actually. The carriage house should be functional as a studio by December." "Good." Another pause. "The Chicago exhibition is significant. Congratulations." Samantha blinked in surprise. "How did you know about that?" "Catherine Westfield mentioned it at a museum board meeting last week. She speaks highly of your work." The realization that James was tracking her professional progress through his social connections was unsettling but not entirely surprising. Information had always been currency in his world. "Thank you," she replied simply, unsure what else to say. "I'll have Lily ready at noon on Sunday for pickup," he concluded, returning to their standard parenting exchange protocol. "Good night, Samantha." After hanging up, Samantha sat motionless at her kitchen table, processing the strange conversation. James's invitation, or more accurately, Eleanor's invitation delivered through James, represented yet another shift in their post-divorce landscape. The acknowledgement of her Chicago exhibition suggested he was paying attention to her career in a way he never had during their marriage. Whether this attention stemmed from genuine respect or simply a desire to keep tabs on her growing public profile remained unclear. With James, personal and strategic motivations were often indistinguishable, even to himself. Thanksgiving at Eleanor Hawthorne's estate was an exercise in carefully managed civility. The elegant Georgian mansion in Buckhead, with its manicured grounds and formal dining room that could comfortably seat 20, provided ample space for maintaining polite distance when needed. Samantha arrived at noon as suggested, bringing a homemade cranberry relish and a small photo album she created for Eleanor, candid shots of Lily's recent milestones that she knew the older woman would treasure. "These are precious," Eleanor said softly, examining the photographs in the privacy of her sitting room while James took Lily to see the koi pond in the garden. "You've captured her personality perfectly." "She's becoming quite the little character," Samantha agreed, watching through the window as Lily pointed excitedly at the colorful fish, James kneeling beside her with uncharacteristic patience. Strong-willed and curious about everything. Like her mother. Eleanor's gaze was knowing. The Chicago exhibition is quite an honor. Catherine was impressed by the museum's interest in your work. It's an amazing opportunity, Samantha acknowledged, though the timing is complicated with Lily. Perhaps I could help with that. Eleanor set down the photo album carefully. I'd be happy to stay with Lily at your home while you're in Chicago. It would give us some grandmother time, and she'd be in her familiar environment. The offer was generous and unexpected. Are you sure? It would be at least 2 nights. Quite sure. James will be in London that week for the medical technology conference, so my calendar is open. Eleanor smiled slightly. Besides, I'm curious to see this Victorian house you're renovating. Catherine mentioned it has excellent bones. The realization that Eleanor and Catherine Westfield discussed her regularly was still surprising. This alliance of formidable older women taking an interest in her life and career. Thank you, Samantha said sincerely. That would help tremendously. Dinner itself was a masterpiece of Southern tradition executed with Eleanor's impeccable taste. Turkey with cornbread dressing, bourbon sweet potatoes, fresh green beans with almonds, and 3 different pies prepared by the housekeeper who had served the Hawthorne family for decades. Conversation remained carefully neutral, focused primarily on Lily's development and safe topics like the unseasonably warm weather. James was polite but reserved, his attention divided between his daughter and occasional glances at his phone, where Samantha suspected messages from Chloe awaited response. It was during dessert that Eleanor introduced a topic that shifted the careful equilibrium of the day. Samantha, I've been meaning to ask, would you consider photographing the hospital charity gala next month? The photographer we've used for years is unavailable, and your work would bring a fresh perspective to the event. The request hung in the air, its significance clear to everyone at the table. The hospital gala was Hawthorne Innovation's premier philanthropic event of the year, where James showcased the company's latest medical advancements and cultivated relationships with healthcare executives and potential investors. James set down his fork, his expression unreadable. Mother, I'm not sure that's appropriate. Why not? Eleanor challenged mildly. Samantha is one of Atlanta's most talented photographers, with a particular gift for capturing genuine moments rather than posed artifice. Isn't that exactly what we want for an event celebrating real impact on patients' lives? There are dozens of qualified photographers in Atlanta, James countered, his tone measured but firm. Hiring my ex-wife creates unnecessary complications. Actually, Samantha interjected, surprising herself with her calm assertion. It would be entirely professional. I photographed the gala before we were married, James. I know the event, the venue, the lighting challenges, and my work has only improved since then. Eleanor smiled approvingly. Exactly my thinking. Besides, the board specifically mentioned admiring the authenticity in your recent exhibition. Several members suggested your name before I had the chance. James looked between his mother and Samantha, perhaps recognizing the subtle alliance that had formed between them. After a moment, he shrugged with calculated indifference. If the board approves, I have no objection, as long as everyone understands this is strictly a professional engagement. Of course, Samantha agreed, maintaining her composure despite the small thrill of victory. Photographing the gala would not only be a lucrative contract, but also a symbolic reclamation of professional territory she had surrendered during their marriage. I'll provide the same contract and terms as any other client. The conversation moved on to Lily's delight with pumpkin pie, but something had shifted in the dynamic between Samantha and James, a rebalancing of power that acknowledged her professional value independent of their personal history. Later, as Samantha prepared to leave with a sleepy Lily in her arms, Eleanor walked her to the door while James took a business call in his study. You handled that beautifully? Eleanor murmured, adjusting Lily's coat with grandmotherly attention to detail. James needs to recognize that your paths will continue to cross professionally as your career grows. Better to establish the parameters now. Was that your plan all along? Samantha asked, suddenly understanding the strategic thinking behind the seemingly casual dinner invitation. Eleanor's smile was enigmatic. Let's just say I believe in creating opportunities for necessary adjustments. James has always respected capability and success, even when it challenges him. Your work deserves to be seen, Samantha, including by my son. As Samantha drove home with Lily sleeping peacefully in her car seat, she reflected on Eleanor's subtle orchestration of the day. The older woman had created a context for James to see Samantha not as his ex-wife or Lily's mother, but as a successful professional whose work commanded respect in circles that mattered to him. It was a kind of advocacy Samantha hadn't expected, not just for her relationship with Lily, but for her identity beyond motherhood. In her own elegant, understated way, Eleanor Hawthorne was helping to ensure that Samantha Brooks would never again become invisible. The hospital charity gala in December marked another milestone in Samantha's professional resurrection. Photographing Atlanta's elite in the same ballroom where she had first met James 12 years earlier created a symmetry that wasn't lost on her. A full-circle moment that highlighted just how much had changed. She moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, her camera capturing the genuine moments of connection amid the performative philanthropy. A doctor kneeling to speak with a young patient who had benefited from Hawthorne Innovations' cardiac device. Board members engaged in passionate discussion about expanding access to care. Eleanor Hawthorne's dignified presence as she introduced donors to researchers whose work they supported. James was in his element, commanding attention as he unveiled the company's newest innovation, a miniaturized pacemaker that could be implanted with minimal invasion. His presentation was flawless, his passion for the technology's life-saving potential evident in every word. Samantha photographed him from a distance, capturing his genuine enthusiasm for the work itself rather than the accolades it brought. In these moments, focused on innovation rather than acquisition, she glimpsed again the man she had fallen in love with, brilliant, visionary, capable of creating technology that transformed lives. It was during a quiet moment, as the formal presentations concluded and guests mingled over champagne and dessert, that Chloe Davis approached her, the first direct interaction that had since the confrontation in the divorce attorney's office nearly a year earlier. "Your photographs from the exhibition," Chloe said without preamble, her voice low to avoid being overheard. "They were illuminating." Samantha lowered her camera, studying the younger woman carefully. Chloe looked different somehow, still beautiful and impeccably styled, but with a tension around her eyes that hadn't been present before. "Thank you," Samantha replied neutrally, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I recognized myself in some of them." Chloe glanced across the room to where James was deep in conversation with hospital executives. The gradual adjustments, the careful calculations about which parts of yourself to preserve and which to surrender. The admission was unexpected, a vulnerability Samantha hadn't anticipated from the woman who had participated in the dismantling of her marriage. "It happened so slowly you barely notice," Samantha said, neither accusatory nor sympathetic, simply acknowledging a shared experience. "Yes." Chloe's gaze returned to Samantha, direct and unflinching. "I wanted to hate you, you know? It would have been easier if you were bitter or vindictive. But you're neither of those things. Hate requires energy I'd rather invest elsewhere," Samantha replied honestly. "In Lily, in my work, in rebuilding." Chloe nodded, twisting the engagement ring on her finger, the antique diamond that had once belonged to James's grandmother, that should have been Lily's inheritance. "The wedding's been postponed. Again." The information was offered without context, a statement that seemed to carry significance beyond the simple fact of a delayed ceremony. "I'm sorry to hear that," Samantha said, though she wasn't entirely sure if sympathy was what Chloe wanted or expected. "Are you?" Chloe asked, a hint of bitterness edging her voice. "It would be understandable if you weren't." Samantha considered the question carefully, aware that this conversation was venturing into complicated emotional territory. "What I feel about your relationship with James isn't relevant anymore. That chapter of my life is closed." "Is it?" Chloe's gaze was searching. "You share a child. You're photographing his company's most important event. Eleanor has practically adopted you into the family fold. Nothing about this seems closed." "Co-parenting isn't the same as marriage," Samantha clarified. "And professional engagements are just that, professional. As for Eleanor, she paused, still processing that unexpected alliance herself. She's Lily's grandmother. That connection remains regardless of what happened between James and me. Chloe seemed about to say more when James appeared beside her, his hand settling possessively at the small of her back. His expression was pleasant, but his eyes were watchful as they moved between the two women. "Samantha, I trust you're getting everything you need for the event coverage." His tone was professionally cordial, giving no indication of their personal history to anyone who might be observing. "Yes, the lighting is excellent this year. Much better than the last time I photographed this event." Samantha deliberately referenced her work before their relationship, a subtle reminder that her professional identity existed independent of him. "Good." James turned to Chloe. "The Carmichael Foundation representatives are asking about the pediatric applications. We should speak with them before they leave." The dismissal was clear, though politely executed. Chloe offered Samantha a final glance, something unspoken in her eyes, before allowing herself to be guided away toward the potential donors. As Samantha resumed her photography, capturing the elegant conclusion of the evening, she found herself reflecting on the brief exchange with Chloe. The postponed wedding, the subtle tension between James and his fiancée, the hint of recognition in Chloe's comments about Samantha's exhibition, all suggested complications in the relationship that had once seemed so threatening to her own security. There was no satisfaction in this realization, only a quiet understanding that patterns tended to repeat themselves when the underlying dynamics remained unchanged. James Hawthorne was still James Hawthorne, brilliant, ambitious, and fundamentally incapable of prioritizing personal relationships above his vision of success. The Chicago exhibition in January exceeded all expectations. The Museum of Contemporary Photography had positioned Samantha's work prominently within the show, her 3 photographs from Invisible Women drawing particular attention from critics and visitors alike. "Your perspective on female erasure within power dynamics resonates universally," remarked the museum's curator during the opening reception. "We've had several inquiries about acquiring these pieces for permanent collections." The 2 days in Chicago were a whirlwind of professional connections, critical discussions about her work, and tentative conversations about future exhibition opportunities in New York and San Francisco. Throughout it all, Samantha found herself grateful for Eleanor's presence in Atlanta, caring for Lily in the familiar surroundings of their newly renovated Victorian home. Each evening, Eleanor sent photographs of their activities, baking cookies in the kitchen, reading stories in the window seat Samantha had created in Lily's bedroom, exploring the small backyard garden despite the January chill. These glimpses of her daughter's happiness provided the grounding Samantha needed amid the heady experience of institutional recognition. When she returned home, exhausted but exhilarated by the trip, she found the house immaculate and Lily bubbling with stories about her adventures with Gamma. "We made a fort in the living room," Lily explained excitedly, her vocabulary expanding daily at 20 months old. "And Gamma told stories about when Daddy was little." "Did she?" Samantha glanced at Eleanor, who was preparing tea in the kitchen with the same elegant efficiency she brought to everything. "What kind of stories?" "Daddy climbed a tree and got stuck," Lily giggled. "Gamma had to call firemen to get him down." Eleanor joined them, setting down a tray with tea for the adults and milk in a special cup for Lily. "I may have shared a few humanizing anecdotes about James's childhood. I thought it important for Lily to understand her father as a complete person, not just the successful businessman she sees now." The thoughtfulness behind this approach touched Samantha deeply. Eleanor was providing Lily with a fuller picture of her father, creating connections that transcended the current complicated dynamics. "Thank you," Samantha said simply, "for everything." Eleanor nodded, understanding the gratitude extended beyond the immediate childcare. "The exhibition was well received? Beyond anything I expected. There's interest from galleries in New York and possibly a commission from the Women's Foundation for a series on female entrepreneurs." "Wonderful." Eleanor's approval seemed genuinely warm. "You've rebuilt remarkably quickly. Most people would still be finding their footing after what you've experienced." "I had a good foundation to return to," Samantha replied, watching as Lily carefully arranged her stuffed animals for an imaginary tea party, and powerful motivation to stand firmly on it. Later, after Lily was asleep and Eleanor had departed with promises to visit again soon, Samantha sat in her new studio space in the renovated carriage house, reviewing the photographs from Chicago. The exhibition, the connections made, the critical response, all represented professional validation she had once thought permanently beyond her reach. Yet the most meaningful images weren't from Chicago at all, but the photographs Eleanor had sent of Lily during her absence, her daughter's joyful exploration of the world, her growing independence, her secure attachment despite the fracturing of her parents' marriage. These were the true measure of success, and not the exhibitions or reviews, but the creation of a life where both she and Lily could thrive authentically. Spring brought new growth to the garden Samantha had started behind the Victorian house, mirroring the continued flourishing of her career and Lily's development. At 2 years old, Lily was a whirlwind of energy and language, her personality emerging more distinctly with each passing day. The custody arrangement had stabilized into a workable routine, with James maintaining his scheduled weekends though still occasionally invoking the first right of refusal when business demands took precedence. These instances had decreased, however, suggesting either a genuine effort to prioritize his time with Lily or perhaps strategic awareness that his parenting commitment would be evaluated in any future custody discussions. More surprising was the gradual thawing in his interactions with Samantha. Their exchanges at custody transitions had evolved from tense civility to something approaching cordial co-parenting, with actual conversations about Lily's development rather than merely logistical information. "She's asking more complex questions," James observed one Sunday evening as he returned Lily after his weekend. "About how things work, why the sky changes colors at sunset. Her cognitive development is impressive. She's curious about everything," Samantha agreed, helping Lily remove her shoes in the entryway. "Her preschool teacher says she's particularly interested in building things. She spent an hour constructing a bridge out of blocks last week." A flash of genuine pleasure crossed James's face. "Engineering instincts already. I was the same way as a child. Your mother mentioned that. She's been sharing stories about your childhood with Lily." Something complicated flickered in James's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or a reluctant appreciation for his mother's efforts to connect his past with his daughter's present. Mother has always had her own approach to family dynamics. "She's been a tremendous support," Samantha acknowledged, careful to keep any hint of alliance from her tone. This wasn't about sides or victories, but about the network of relationships surrounding Lily. James nodded, his attention drawn to the framed photograph hanging in the entryway, a black and white image of Lily laughing as she chased bubbles in the backyard, her joy captured with perfect clarity. "Your work continues to impress. The Women's Foundation series has received significant attention." The commission from the Women's Foundation had evolved into a major project documenting female entrepreneurs who had overcome substantial obstacles to build successful businesses. The resulting photographs had been featured in a national business magazine, further cementing Samantha's reputation for capturing authentic human stories within professional contexts. "Thank you," she replied, still slightly surprised whenever James acknowledged her professional accomplishments. "It's been a meaningful project." An awkward silence fell between them, the conversation having ventured beyond their usual parameters of custody logistics and Lily's immediate needs. James glanced at his watch, the familiar gesture signaling his retreat to more comfortable territory. "I should go. Board meeting tomorrow morning." He knelt to Lily's level, his expression softening as it always did with her. "I'll see you on Friday, Princess. Remember what we talked about. You're going to show me how to build that special tower with your blocks." "The super tall one," Lily confirmed seriously, "with the bridge on top." "Exactly." He kissed her forehead before standing. "Good night, Samantha." As he walked to his car, Samantha noticed something she hadn't registered before: the absence of his engagement ring. The platinum band that had appeared shortly after Chloe began wearing the antique diamond was no longer on his left hand. She said nothing, filing away the observation without comment as she closed the door and turned her attention to Lily's bedtime routine. Whatever was happening in James's personal life was his concern, relevant to her only insofar as it might affect Lily's well-being. The answer came 3 days later in the form of a text message from Eleanor. You should know that James and Chloe have ended their engagement. It was announced to the family yesterday. I thought you should hear it from me rather than through Atlanta gossip channels. Samantha stared at the message, processing this unexpected development. The engagement that had seemed so certain when she walked into the divorce attorney's office with Lily in her arms, confronted by the sight of her family heirloom on Chloe's finger, had apparently dissolved. She typed a simple response. Thank you for letting me know. I hope everyone is handling it as well as possible. Eleanor's reply came quickly. James is focused on work, as always. Chloe has accepted a position with a technology firm in Boston. The transition appears amicable on the surface. The subtext was clear. Surface appearances in the Hawthorne world often masked more complicated realities. Samantha wondered briefly about Chloe's conversation with her at the gala, the postponed wedding, the subtle tension she had observed. Had Chloe ultimately recognized the pattern Samantha had documented in her exhibition? Had she chosen a different path before her own identity became subsumed? These questions weren't hers to answer, nor was the end of James's engagement particularly relevant to her own life now. Yet she found herself hoping that Chloe had made the choice that best preserved her authentic self, whatever that might be. The 2-year anniversary of Samantha's discovery of James's affair arrived without fanfare, marked only by her private recognition of how completely her life had transformed since that devastating night. The woman who had sat in a darkened living room with a feverish baby, scrolling through text messages that shattered her world, would hardly recognize the life she now inhabited. The Victorian house had blossomed under her renovation efforts, each room gradually reflecting her aesthetic vision while accommodating Lily's growing needs. The Carriage House studio had become a thriving professional space, hosting client sessions and providing room for her increasingly recognized fine art photography. Most importantly, she had reclaimed not just her career, but her sense of self. The confidence and clarity that had attracted James initially, but had gradually been eroded during their marriage. This restoration wasn't about returning to who she had been before, but about integrating all she had experienced into a stronger, more defined identity. The Women's Foundation Project had led to a book deal, documenting female resilience across various professional fields. The advance had provided additional financial security, allowing Samantha to be selective about commercial work and focus more on projects with personal meaning. Lily continued to thrive, her relationship with both parents stable despite their separation. James had maintained his parenting schedule with fewer business interruptions, suggesting a genuine effort to prioritize his daughter. Their co-parenting communication had evolved into a functional, if not warm, partnership focused on Lily's well-being. It was during this period of relative stability that James requested a meeting outside their normal custody exchanges, a conversation without Lily present, at a neutral coffee shop near Samantha's studio. I have a significant business trip coming up, he explained once they were seated with their respective drinks. 3 weeks in Singapore and Tokyo for the expansion of our Asian markets. It falls partly during my scheduled time with Lily. I can adjust my schedule to keep her during those weekends, Samantha offered immediately, seeing no issue with the request. Just let me know the exact dates. Thank you. James seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, turning his coffee cup slowly between his hands. There's something else I wanted to discuss. The Hawthorne Family Foundation is establishing a new initiative focused on arts education for underserved communities. Mother suggested you might be interested in developing the photography component. The proposal was unexpected, a professional opportunity connected to the Hawthorne name but focused on Samantha's expertise rather than her former status as James's wife. That sounds like a meaningful project, she replied carefully. What exactly would it involve? Designing a curriculum for high school students, mentoring several scholarship recipients each year, possibly exhibiting their work alongside established photographers. James outlined the program with his usual precision. The foundation would provide all necessary equipment and facilities. Your compensation would be commensurate with industry standards for this level of expertise. Samantha considered the offer, aware of the complex dynamics involved. This is Eleanor's idea, isn't it? A slight smile touched James's lips. Mother has become quite the advocate for arts education recently, and for your work specifically, but the Foundation Board has unanimously approved the concept. This isn't charity or an attempt to keep you connected to the Hawthorne name. It's a recognition of your professional qualifications. The clarification was important, an acknowledgement that any collaboration would be based on her merit rather than their personal history. I'd need to see the formal proposal, Samantha said, neither accepting nor rejecting the opportunity outright, and understand how it would fit with my existing commitments. Of course, James nodded, seemingly satisfied with this response. I'll have the Foundation director send over the complete documentation. As he prepared to leave, having completed the ostensible purpose of their meeting, James hesitated again, a rare uncertainty in a man typically defined by decisive action. The book, he said finally. Your project with the Women's Foundation. I've read the advance copy Eleanor received. Samantha waited, unsure where this was leading. It's extraordinary work, Samantha. Not just technically accomplished, but illuminating. You see people, really see them, in a way few can. He met her gaze directly. I should have recognized that gift more fully when we were together. Supported it rather than sidelining it for my convenience. The admission, the closest thing to an apology James Hawthorne might ever offer, hung between them, unexpected and unasked for. Thank you for saying that, Samantha replied simply, neither absolving nor condemning him for past choices. It matters that you see it now. James nodded once, accepting this measured response. Safe travels to New York next month. Eleanor mentioned you're speaking at the Women in Photography conference. Yes, on a panel about visual storytelling and social change. The fact that James and Eleanor apparently discussed her professional activities regularly was still somewhat surprising, though less disconcerting than it once would have been. Well-deserved recognition. He stood, their conversation complete. I'll have those Foundation documents sent over tomorrow. As Samantha watched him leave, she reflected on the subtle shift in their dynamic, the gradual evolution from adversaries in a bitter custody battle to something approaching mutual professional respect. It wasn't friendship or reconciliation, but rather a new equilibrium that acknowledged both their permanent connection through Lily and their separate paths forward. The woman who had walked into the divorce attorney's office with a baby in her arms, confronted with her husband's betrayal in its most visible form, could never have imagined this future, not just surviving that devastating moment, but transcending it to build something stronger and more authentic than what had been lost. If you believe a woman's strength often comes from her deepest wounds, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that remind us of our resilience. 2 years later, on a warm spring afternoon, Samantha stood in the gallery of the Atlanta Arts Center, surveying the final arrangements for her most ambitious exhibition to date. Reclamation featured 40 photographs documenting women's journeys of self-recovery after significant life disruptions, divorce, career setbacks, health crises, and other profound challenges. At 4 years old, Lily darted between the display panels, her energy barely contained despite Eleanor's gentle attempts to redirect her enthusiasm into more gallery-appropriate behavior. It looks wonderful, Eleanor commented, giving up on restraining her granddaughter and instead focusing on the powerful images surrounding them. Each story so different, yet the thread of resilience connects them all. That was the intention, Samantha agreed, making a final adjustment to the lighting on the exhibition centerpiece. A triptych showing a woman's transformation through grief after losing her husband, the final image capturing her face in a moment of hard-won peace. Finding the common humanity in diverse experiences of recovery. The exhibition represented a significant milestone, not just professionally, as Samantha's first solo show at the prestigious Arts Center, but personally as well. Among the 40 women featured were several who had participated in the mentorship program she developed for the Hawthorne Foundation. Their journeys from tentative beginners to confident visual storytellers documented alongside. Among the 40 women featured were several who had participated in the mentorship program she developed for the Hawthorne Foundation. Their journeys from tentative beginners to confident visual storytellers documented alongside their personal narratives of reclamation. Mommy, when are people coming? Lily asked, returning to Samantha's side and slipping her small hand into her mother's. I want to show them my favorite pictures. Soon, sweetheart. The opening starts in about an hour. Samantha smiled down at her daughter, whose understanding of photography had grown alongside her own renewed career. Lily had spent countless hours in the Carriage House studio, observing Samantha's work with clients and her personal projects, developing an eye for composition that was remarkable for her age. Is Daddy coming? Lily's question was casual, free from the tension that might once have accompanied it. Yes, he'll be here, Samantha confirmed. He has a meeting first, but he promised to attend. The evolution of their co-parenting relationship had continued its gradual improvement over the past 2 years. James had maintained his commitment to his parenting time with increasing consistency, and their communications about Lily had developed a respectful rhythm that prioritized their daughter's needs above lingering personal history. James had never remarried after his broken engagement with Chloe, though Atlanta gossip occasionally linked him with various professional women. These relationships seemed to follow a pattern. Initial intensity followed by a gradual fading as James's work inevitably took precedence. Samantha observed this pattern without judgment, recognizing that some aspects of James's character remained unchanged despite the growth he'd shown as a father. Her own personal life had expanded cautiously. A brief relationship with a photography curator had ended amicably when their professional paths diverged, and more recently, she'd begun spending time with Daniel Mercer, an architect who had consulted on the final phase of her home renovation. Their connection was still new, built on shared aesthetic sensibilities and his genuine delight in both her work and Lily's exuberant personality. Ms. Brooks, the gallery director approached, clipboard in hand. The caterers have arrived, and the first press representatives should be here in about 30 minutes. Is there anything else you need before we open the doors? Everything looks perfect, thank you. Samantha surveyed the space once more, pride mingling with a touch of nervousness. This exhibition represented her most personal work since Invisible Women, though from a place of strength rather than raw vulnerability. As Eleanor took Lily to the restroom before guests arrived, Samantha found herself alone in the gallery, surrounded by images that collectively told a story of transformation. Not just her own, but a universal narrative of women reclaiming their power after circumstances had threatened to diminish it. The exhibition opening exceeded all expectations. Art critics, collectors, and supporters filled the gallery, moving thoughtfully between the photographs while engaging with the stories behind them. Several of the women featured in the exhibition attended, creating powerful moments as viewers connected the images with the real people whose journeys they documented. James arrived midway through the evening, impeccably dressed as always but without the entourage that typically accompanied him to public events. He moved through the gallery methodically, studying each photograph with genuine attention rather than the perfunctory interest he might once have shown in Samantha's work. When he reached the section featuring graduates of the Hawthorne Foundation Mentorship Program, he paused longer, perhaps recognizing the connection between his family's resources and the artistic development displayed in these powerful images. Daddy! Lily spotted him from across the room, weaving through the crowd with the confident navigation of a child accustomed to gallery openings. Come see my favorite picture. James allowed himself to be led by his daughter to a photograph near the center of the exhibition, an image of a middle-aged woman standing in the doorway of a new business, her face reflecting both apprehension and determination as she prepared to open for the first day. See how the light makes half her face bright and half in shadow? Lily explained with the seriousness of a miniature curator. Mommy says that shows how starting something new is scary and exciting at the same time. That's very insightful, James replied, genuinely impressed by his daughter's understanding. You have your mother's eye for visual storytelling. That's what Gamma says too. Lily beamed at the comparison. I'm going to be a photographer like Mommy when I grow up. Or maybe an engineer like you. Or maybe both. You can certainly be both, James assured her, his expression softening as it always did with Lily. The world needs people who can see both the technical and the human elements of life. As Lily was distracted by the arrival of her preschool teacher, who had come specifically to support the exhibition, James made his way to where Samantha stood speaking with a museum curator from New York. He waited politely for their conversation to conclude before approaching. "Congratulations, Samantha. This is remarkable work." "Thank you." She accepted the compliment with the quiet confidence that had become her hallmark. "I'm particularly proud of the mentorship program graduates' contributions. Their progress has been extraordinary. The foundation board is impressed as well. They've approved funding to expand the program to 3 additional cities next year." James delivered this news with evident satisfaction. "Your curriculum design has proven more successful than anyone anticipated." The professional collaboration through the Hawthorne Foundation had provided an unexpected bridge between their separate worlds, a neutral territory where James's resources and Samantha's artistic vision combined to create opportunities for others. The program had become one of the Foundation's most celebrated initiatives, generating positive press and genuine impact in communities with limited access to arts education. "That's wonderful news," Samantha replied sincerely. "The students deserve every opportunity to develop their voices." A comfortable silence fell between them, not the tense, awkward pauses of their early post-divorce interactions, but a moment of shared appreciation for what they had each contributed to something meaningful. "Lily mentioned you're considering the artist-in-residence position at Westridge Academy next fall," James said finally. "It sounds like an excellent opportunity." The prestigious private school had approached Samantha about developing an intensive photography program for their arts-focused curriculum, a part-time position that would allow her to maintain her studio practice while sharing her expertise with serious young artists. "I'm still weighing the commitment," Samantha acknowledged. "It would require adjusting my client's schedule, but the teaching aspect is appealing. If it helps with the decision, I'd be happy to adjust our custody schedule during the academic year, perhaps taking Lily for 2 weeknights instead of 1, to give you more flexibility for evening classes." The offer was made matter-of-factly, without expectation of gratitude or recognition. "That's very considerate, James. Thank you." Samantha studied him thoughtfully, recognizing how far they had come from the bitter custody battle that had once consumed them. "I'll let you know once I've made a decision about the position." Their conversation was interrupted by the gallery director announcing that Catherine Westfield would be making remarks about the exhibition. As guests gathered near the center of the space, Samantha took her place beside Catherine, while James moved to stand near Eleanor and Lily. Catherine's assessment of reclamation was characteristically insightful, placing Samantha's work within the broader context of visual storytelling about women's experiences while highlighting its distinctive emotional authenticity. As she concluded her remarks, she raised her glass in a toast. To Samantha Brooks, whose lens reveals not just how women appear, but who they truly are in moments of challenge, transformation, and triumph. This exhibition reminds us that reclamation isn't about returning to who we were before loss or disruption, but about integrating those experiences into a more authentic, powerful self. The applause was warm and genuine, the gathered crowd responding to both the quality of the work and the universal resonance of its theme. As Samantha thanked everyone for coming, her gaze swept across the room, taking in the diverse audience her work had attracted: art world professionals, students from the mentorship program, women whose stories she had documented, and her own unconventional family constellation. Lily, Eleanor, James, and Daniel, who had arrived late after finishing a client meeting. Later, as the event wound down and the last guests departed, Samantha found herself alone in the gallery with Lily, who had fallen asleep on a bench near the exhibition entrance. James had left for a late business dinner, Eleanor had gone home to rest, and Daniel had stepped out to take an urgent call from a project site. In this quiet moment, surrounded by images of women who had reclaimed their power after significant disruption, Samantha felt the full circle of her own journey. The woman who had walked into the divorce attorney's office with a baby in her arms, confronted with her husband's betrayal in its most visible form, had transformed that shattering moment into the catalyst for reclaiming not just her career, but her essential self. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been moments of doubt, financial strain, and the constant challenge of balancing motherhood with professional rebirth. Yet each obstacle had ultimately strengthened her resolve, each small victory building toward the life she now inhabited, not perfect, but authentically hers. As she gathered her sleeping daughter into her arms, preparing to leave the gallery that now showcased her vision to the world, Samantha reflected on the most important lesson of her journey. True reclamation wasn't about recovering what was lost, but about discovering what had been within her all along, waiting for the courage to fully emerge. 2 months after the reclamation exhibition, Samantha sat in the sunlit breakfast nook of her Victorian home, reviewing the final contract for the Westridge Academy position. She had decided to accept the artist-in-residence role, drawn by the opportunity to shape young photographers' development while maintaining her independent studio practice. James had followed through on his offer to adjust their custody schedule, taking Lily for dinner and overnight on Tuesdays and Thursdays during the academic year to accommodate Samantha's teaching commitments. The revised arrangement had been formalized without conflict, another marker of their evolving ability to co-parent effectively. As Samantha signed the contract, her phone chimed with a text message from Eleanor. "Lunch tomorrow? I have news to share." Curious about this mysterious announcement, Samantha confirmed their regular monthly lunch date at Eleanor's favorite restaurant. These gatherings had become a valued tradition, a space where grandmother and former daughter-in-law maintained their unexpected alliance, centered on Lily's well-being, but extending into mutual respect and something approaching friendship. The following day, as they settled at their usual table overlooking the restaurant's garden, Eleanor appeared more animated than usual, a subtle excitement visible beneath her customary elegance. "You're looking well," Samantha observed, accepting the menu from their regular server. "There's something different about you today." "Perceptive as always," Eleanor smiled, waiting until they had ordered before continuing. "I've decided to step down as chairwoman of the Hawthorne Foundation." The announcement was surprising. Eleanor had led the family foundation for over 15 years, shaping its philanthropic focus and overseeing its significant expansion. "That's a major change. Is everything all right?" "Everything is excellent," Eleanor assured her. "I'm not retiring completely. I'll remain on the board. But I'm ready to pursue some personal projects that I've deferred for too long." "What kind of projects?" Samantha was genuinely curious about what Eleanor Hawthorne might consider a deferred personal ambition. "I've established a separate foundation focused specifically on women in transition, those rebuilding after divorce, career disruption, or other significant life changes." Eleanor's eyes held a spark of enthusiasm Samantha had rarely seen in her typically reserved former mother-in-law. "Your work these past few years has been quite inspiring, Samantha. It made me realize how many women need practical support during periods of reinvention." The revelation that Eleanor had found inspiration in Samantha's journey was deeply touching. "That sounds like meaningful work. What kind of support will the foundation provide?" "Educational grants, business startup funding, housing assistance during transitions, legal aid for those who can't afford quality representation." Eleanor outlined her vision with characteristic precision. "And a mentorship network connecting women who have successfully navigated major life changes with those just beginning the process." "It's brilliant," Samantha said sincerely, recognizing the potential impact of such targeted support, "and perfectly suited to your organizational skills and connections. Which brings me to the second part of my news." Eleanor met Samantha's gaze directly. "I'd like you to consider joining the Foundation's advisory board. Your perspective would be invaluable, both from your personal experience and your professional work documenting women's resilience." The invitation represented yet another evolution in their relationship, a recognition of Samantha not just as Lily's mother or James's ex-wife, but as a woman whose insights and experiences had independent value. "I'd be honored," Samantha replied without hesitation. "The mission resonates deeply with me." "Wonderful." Eleanor's pleasure at her acceptance was evident. "We'll have our first formal meeting next month. In the meantime, I have something for you." She reached into her elegant handbag and withdrew a small velvet box, sliding it across the table to Samantha. "This belongs with you now." Puzzled, Samantha opened the box to find a familiar antique diamond ring, the family heirloom that had once been on her finger, then briefly on Chloe's, before disappearing after the broken engagement. "Eleanor, I don't understand." Samantha stared at the ring, memories of both joy and pain associated with the beautiful piece. This ring has been passed down through generations of Hawthorne women, Eleanor explained gently. It was always intended for Lily eventually. I've spoken with James, and we both agree it should be in your keeping until Lily is old enough to receive it. You're her mother, the one who will guide her through the milestones where such family connections matter. The gesture was profound, not just the return of the ring itself, but the acknowledgement of Samantha's primary role in Lily's life and her permanent connection to the Hawthorne family legacy, regardless of her marriage's end. Thank you, Samantha said simply, closing the box carefully. I'll keep it safe for her. As their lunch continued, conversation shifting to Lily's upcoming dance recital and Samantha's plans for the Westridge Academy curriculum, she felt a sense of completion that had been building gradually over the past 4 years. The circle that had begun with betrayal and loss had transformed through resilience and reclamation into something unexpected. Not the life she had planned, but one rich with authentic purpose and connection. The woman who had walked into the divorce attorney's office with a baby in her arms, confronted with her husband's new fiancée wearing her family heirloom, could never have imagined this outcome, not just surviving that devastating moment, but transcending it to build a life more aligned with her true self than the marriage had ever been. The ring would wait safely in its box until Lily was ready to receive it, carrying with it not just the Hawthorne family history, but the added legacy of her mother's journey, a testament to the power of reclamation and the beauty that can emerge when a woman refuses to remain invisible. Queens, remember that your story doesn't end with heartbreak. It begins with how you rise from it. What part of Samantha's journey resonated most with you? Share in the comments below.